Chip and Bill Miller had known each other since the late 1960s, and in the fall of 1973, the two men came together to attend an event that focused on pre-World War II cars. Definitely not their era of interest.
I said to Bill, well, why don't we just start something for people with cars like this, interests like ours? And basically that was the seed. That started the whole thing.
And that eventually led to each of us pledging $500, looking for a venue, and starting a car show. And we just did it for fun. It wasn't to be a business. It was just a get-together for like-minded car guys. And everybody came.
Chip and Bill met through a mutual friend that introduced the two of them. The guy knew that they both were really into cars, so he introduced them. And from day one, they went to Hershey together. That's where the idea for Carlisle came from, because Chip had taken a '54 Corvette to Hershey, and they told him it was too new. And Chip and Bill both liked post-war cars. That's how the name came about, post-war '74.
The more we talked about it, the more we thought it was a great idea. You weren't allowed to sell anything at Hershey that wasn't 35 years old or older. You weren't allowed to sell parts that weren't 25 years old or older. So we went to all the car shows in the area. We passed out all kinds of flyers, and we called it Post-War '74. We invited everybody to the Carlisle Fairgrounds, which we had rented at the time, to a car show.
We would be sitting at the kitchen table. The only difference, after Mom cooked and we had dinner, we would clear off the table and we folded up flyers, sent them out. We would fold up the confirmations. Dad would put them in the envelope, and I would put the stamp on the envelopes. And that's how it all started.
When I was 8, 9, 10 years old, we would come up in the springtime and clean off the discs in the ground, because back then we didn't have a whole lot of employees. And I remember being out there with the measuring tape, 10 feet, and just trying to find the discs. A lot of them had disappeared over the winter. So we were out there with our towels, cleaning them up on the fairgrounds and getting ready for the season.
We had no idea that the Carlisle Fairgrounds was the keystone of the Keystone State. That's why all the trucks and everything have depots here in the Carlisle area. Post-war cars came, pre-war cars came, all kinds of parts and things came. We had 600 flea market spaces the first show.
I enjoy cars and toys, and at that time it was something interesting to do.
It was a big deal. It was the second largest show to Hershey in the country at the time.
We actually worked in the office for the shows, which was difficult for both of us because we both had young kids at home, and we have to find people to watch our kids. Plus, it rained those first couple of years. But all in all, it was good. Obviously, it worked. It still survives today, 50 years later.
Well, I mean, obviously the business wouldn't be here if it weren't for Bill and my dad coming together and getting kicked out of a show, which is fortunate at this point in time. You know, two young gentlemen that just wanted to go and follow their passion. That's all they did. And it blossomed. They're very fortunate. So I know that, you know, taking that risk, it's much easier when there's two of you saying, you know what, let's go do it. As you're with your buddy, let's go charge at it and see how it goes. And it goes well, you know, keep growing it. You know, they were always very close friends. Would they get in, you know, little disputes here and there? Absolutely. But what marriage doesn't? Overall, they were always going to be friends at the end. And that's the coolest part of watching the business grow into what it's become.
So you say 77, we started Spring. That was our second show. That was our standalone show. It was kind of
that we really had to make it ourselves.
That was scary.
On her show.
Yeah, that was scary because right, the people aren't going to come from all over the world. We didn't think just for Spring Carlisle, but in fact they did. And actually, Spring Carlisle 77 was bigger than Fall Carlisle 76.
We were busting at the seams. You know, Fall Carlisle was growing leaps and bounds, and it got to the point where, come spring, everybody'd been locked up in the winter doldrums for 6 months, and we thought, you know what, maybe we'll try a spring event. Spring took off like a rocket. It just went and eventually became bigger than fall.
We've been serving the people here for 11 years, and we're glad to be here, and you look like you're hungry, sir.
Car people know where to be when the weather starts to warm, because in the spring, all roads lead to Carlisle.
This is a spring show, and every spring people come out of hibernation up here in the Northeast, and they want to see what's going on, what improvements we've made, and it's very, very gratifying to have them come up and get the compliments we do, and we've got a lot of pride in what we do also.
A lot of people don't realize we have 30 full-time people, and they work year-round. Everybody comes to the show and they think it just kind of happens overnight, but there's a lot of planning and a lot of activities behind the scenes that go into it. And all winter long, they're getting everything ready and putting everything together. So when you get here, it's ready and it's all set to go.
After about 2 or 3 years, they hired their first employee, and her name was Bert Love, and you probably don't remember her. And then she was there for several years, and then Diane Vaughn came on, and Diane was just awesome. She kind of took over everything. And from then, it really, in the beginning, it was Chip, Bill, and Bert or Diane. It was just kind of the three of them. And it wasn't until, I think, the specialty shows where we started hiring more people.
I went to work for two of my really good friends, Bill and Chip Miller. And it was just a small organization. There was the three of us, part-time person down in Lemoyne, and a maintenance director. And it was just an opportunity. I almost went to work somewhere else that had better everything, but I bet on the boys, you know, and bet on my relationship with them. It was a great environment, working with friends, and we kept growing the company, and it was just a place I never wanted to leave.
Each show became bigger. Fall was bigger than spring, spring was bigger than fall. Now, of course, we know that spring is our major show, maybe because we don't have as much competition in the spring, maybe because of the hibernation factor. People are coming out of hibernation. They're ready to get into swap meets, but spring has become the biggie. I guess we ought to head towards 80 with the advent of the Harrisburg show.
Actually, we had events from, the two events from 1977 until 1980. And then we thought it was time for a summer event.
And we didn't own the facility, so we were free to go wherever we pleased.
And that's when we picked the Harrisburg Farm Show building. The Farm Show was really a neat place to do it, having everything indoors. It was early enough in June. The fact that the building wasn't air-conditioned, it's still, made for a nice facility. And of course, parking and road access and everything was fantastic there.
Spring and Fall Carlisle had been taking place on a rented Carlisle, PA fairgrounds, and road events like those in Harrisburg were also gaining traction. But the future of this young company was all of a sudden in jeopardy with a proposed sale of the fairgrounds.
They came to us and said, you have 30 days. If you'd like to buy the fairgrounds, we're going to sell it. We thought, what are we going to do? We went to the bank and laid out a business plan. Well, we didn't have any money. We wanted to finance the entire amount of the fairgrounds. And so the bank spent an hour with us, and they said, when you guys are really ready to do something, you come back and see us. Well, basically, they didn't want to do it. We were pretty dejected about the whole thing, and somebody in town said, why don't you go to Farmers Trust here in Carlisle? So we did, and we went in and presented our case, and the gentleman said, well, the bank board meeting is tomorrow. I don't have time to present this to the board in that amount of time. He said, I'll present it next week. That following Wednesday morning, I got a phone call, and they said, could you and Chip come into the bank? Well, we thought that was kind of promising. So we went to the bank. They took us right into the bank board meeting. There sat 10 or 12 individuals. Well, 2 of them owned the biggest motels here in town. The one had 300 rooms, and we filled it all the time with the car shows. They actually guaranteed 20% of the loan. Those 2 men signed on the loan for us for 20% of the loan. That was our down payment. And we bought the fairgrounds through an Industrial Development Authority loan. And we ended up buying the fairgrounds with no money down. Of course, we did pay for it. Farmers Trust really put us in business.
Let's go to new show.
Find some new shows.
What do you want to go to?
Well, obviously the Corvette show. There we go.
There it is. Corvettes of Carlisle.
Since 1982, Carlisle Productions has put on one of the most exciting all-Corvette meets anywhere. Just walk around the 82-acre fairground, and you'll find there's something here for every Corvette enthusiast.
Chip was Mr. Corvette. He was an absolute authority on Corvettes. He got calls from all over the world about Corvettes, and it was just kind of natural that we would start a Corvette show.
Everybody knew how involved with Corvettes Chip was. And it was just like a natural progression.
Back in those days, we gave away cars at our events, and we gave away a brand new 1982 collector edition Corvette. It was an instant success. Having Chip behind it, he knew so much about Corvettes that, and everybody knew him. Everybody came.
I think they got to the point where, spring and fall show, they certainly got a lot bigger throughout the years. And, for my dad, he was a heavy Corvette enthusiast. Absolutely loved it. He would go to Bloomington Gold. And Bloomington was very much about judging, and he loved that. He liked to judge. However, he loved the camaraderie of the people, everybody coming together. So he decided, why not create Corvettes at Carlisle?
One of the most popular attractions at Carlisle is the fun display. Here's where you can see thousands of Corvettes of every type, vintage and color. The only criteria for cars here, as the name implies, is fun. No rules, no judging, no stress. Owners just show their cars for people's enjoyment and get a chance to talk to their fellow Corvette owners, and that's what it's all about.
It's hard to remember now how we grew into these additional shows. I'm trying to think which was the next show. Next. It was, okay. Just because there wasn't any major show in the country for import cars. And remember that was such a marginal show for so long, but it did give the import people a place to find their parts. Instead of going through 80 acres looking for Jaguar parts, and it might have been one vendor that had Jaguar parts, now they have their own show, and there is half a dozen Jaguar vendors, and the Triumphs and the MGs and on. But I don't think really that show was until when we married it with the replica and the kit cars that it really did start showing itself, and it really became quite a good show. But then it came a whole segment there where really we kind of rested on our laurels. We improved the fairgrounds, but in 1986, we didn't have another new show till 1991, as my recollection goes anyway.
Well, I want to tell you, 1991 was the year that we really put the heat on everybody. If you remember correctly, we started...
Didn't we hire Tim DeMark to do the the antique shows for one thing.
Yes.
That was a great idea. We have a facility. We can, we have to use it more than 5 times a year. So what did we do? We created an antique show.
I started working on, after hired in '88, antiques at Carlisle, 1990. So I virtually had like a year to build and create a vendor base and draw the attraction for people to come through the gate all around the country, up and down the East Coast mainly, at other antique shows.
Then we added the truck show, which was another new event. And
well, the truck everybody was asking for. Everybody said, why don't you do a truck show? Why don't you do a truck show? And of course, there were plenty of truck shows around the country, but never thought of them as being tied in with the swap meet like ours was, and the trucks for sale. But still, our truck show really is a truck show.
Well, at that time, I think there was some rattlings going on in the Chrysler hobby, and
it was Frank Mitchell that we talked to, as I recall.
Frank Mitchell got a hold of us and said, Bill, Chip, this is the ideal time to start a Chrysler event. And all we kept saying to Frank was,
can't do it this year.
It's impossible. We're starting these new events this year, and how are we ever going to start the third one? And
in 6 months, you just can't do it. We never did it before.
But he wouldn't let us go. You have to remember that.
Yeah.
He said,
2 hours later, we were committed, and then we had to come home and tell the troops.
Chrysler's at Carlisle is designed as much as a fun show as it is a hobbyist mecca to buy parts and cars. We try and style it that there's entertainment, there's things to do, something going on all the time.
As we grew, and we grew pretty fast, I'm going to say the Chrysler show, the first year, we may have had like 168 show cars. And when I left, we were doing like 2,000 plus.
Certainly has been very, very well received. The Chrysler people needed a show like this. They were extremely supportive, and probably, I don't know, the most appreciative group I think we have.
No question about it.
Great, great people.
Well, I come to Carlisle because I like hanging around with people who are into Chryslers at night after you're done shopping and looking for those pieces that you want. You get around with a bunch of the guys and you start bench racing or talking about parts or what you're doing to fix this, what's coming out in the market, and so forth. And it's just a nice atmosphere. This is my vacation. I just take the time off. This is the only show that I really come to.
Been a Chrysler fan since I was old enough to drive, and come up here to sell a car and look around and see what's available. Check out some of the really nice show cars, and cars have been restored, and give me the enthusiasm to go home and start on some of my projects I got at home.
Then all of a sudden we get asked by everybody else, right? Okay, you've got these special shows. How about Chevy? How about Ford? How come we're not included? Well, Chevy, as we've said and have said, there's Chevy shows all over the country. There's not as many GM, but Ford we identified as another opportunity.
Welcome to the 1995 First Annual Carlisle All Ford Nationals. This exciting event brings Ford family cars together from across the years and across the continent. Ford fans flock to this 3-day event to share their enthusiasm for the Ford legacy of automotive excellence and innovation. Special indoor invitational shows highlighting Ford's history and outlook to the future, as well as unique close-up of Ford's contribution to racing, made the fairgrounds at Carlisle the place to be on June 9th, 10th, and 11th of 1995.
Well, I can remember when son Bill came along and he said, Dad, you guys are really missing the boat. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you should invite the Custom Compact to the import show. And I said, Billy, I hate to say this, but what's a Custom Compact? And then he explained to me it was the Asian cars with all the ground effects and the stereos and everything else. And
German too.
German too,
Okay.
right? So it was the foreign cars. Let's put it that.
Actually, even I think they include some of the smaller American cars with the custom compacts now, the Neons and whatever out there in that group. Of course, Fiero is pretty well represented with our import show because mainly because of it being a donor car.
Right.
A lot of the kits are built on the Fiero.
The Carlisle GM Nationals became the latest addition to the annual schedule in 2001.
This is the first time we've had an event of this size to start off with. We've done many other shows over the 27 years here at the fairgrounds, but never had we had an event that we had to totally expand from the first day on. So it's really exciting to know how alive and well the hobby is for the GM cars.
And everyone in attendance seemed to agree. Like one of the celebrities that was on hand, drag racing legend Bruce Larson.
Well, I have the best of all worlds when I live right between Carlisle and Hershey, and I just go back and forth from car show to car show. But I'm pretty much a GM guy for the last 20 years, and this has been a long time coming, and I'm glad it's turned out to be a real good show.
As can be. Let's go see some Chevys. All right.
When we walked in this building Friday morning and all these cars were in place, we walked around the fairgrounds, saw how many cars General Motors had brought for us. That was our first cry. What are we going to do next year? We have to top this with next year. And we've had a lot of input from General Motors. They've talked to us specifically about dates and when we're going to do the show next year. And their participation is even going to be better for 2002.
So, get your Chevy, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, or Cadillac ready now.
Four-wheeled modes of transportation had been all the rage for decades, both in society and at events held at the Carlisle, PA Fairgrounds. But in 2002, powered by a boom in interest for all things motorcycle, Carlisle Bike Fest was launched, propelling the Carlisle Events brand to all new heights.
We were diving into the motorcycle industry. We had contacts and arrangements with Dave Perowitz and Donnie Smith and Michelle Smith and some of the builders in that industry, and eventually with American Choppers, with the Tuttles. They came into our show. We kind of booked them, signed on, and by the time the show came around, their show had gone through the roof. Everyone was a fan, and everyone in America was following them. It was incredible. We marketed the event from here to the Delmarva Peninsula through 2, 3, 4 hours outside of our home. And it just brought in the largest crowd that I've never seen so many people at the fairgrounds. The Tuttles were a hit.
For a time, the popularity of Bike Fest had more eyes on Carlisle events than ever before. But in 2003, at Corvettes at Carlisle, that highway paved with success took a bumpy turn as health concerns were suddenly slowing an always energetic Chip Miller, and those closest to him were starting to notice.
I noticed that just going up the slight incline by Q row, he would get out of breath.
And Chip was really dragging. Every time I turned around, he was way behind me. So I said to him, what's going on? He said, oh, I'm tired.
I remember talking to him and just seeing he was lethargic and slow, not himself at all. And he tried to say, it's just age, I'm getting older. And I'm looking at him like, there's no way.
And he said, oh, I'm already working with a doctor. They tell me I've got a thyroid problem. I said, would you mind checking with another doctor? I said, I think you should really find out for sure what's going on. He picked up that he had amyloidosis. That's what he thought. That's a very uncommon disease.
It was very disheartening to watch him go downhill so fast.
When we knew what it was, and we were going out to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, we were in the car. We had found someone Chip couldn't have taken the drive to Minnesota. So we were in the car at the fairgrounds. The whole office came out to say goodbye. To Chip, the office was family. To him. And it always was. That was very, very special. And of course, he never came out there.
I'm going to have a tough time.
It was extremely difficult, for that time with Carlisle.
That was a really rough experience, having to fly out there and know that there was going to be serious complications. And when we got there, we got a chance to talk, but he was going downhill pretty quick.
I remember always being at home, and they were at the Mayo Clinic. And I just remember every time the phone would ring, and I'd see his name, and I'd think, "Is this it?" And then when I'd pick it up and I'd hear his voice, it'd be like, "Whew."
It was about midnight. It was actually dinner time, and he said, "Why don't you guys go get something to eat?" Because we couldn't eat there at the hospital, and he said, "Why don't you guys all go get something to eat?" And so we did. Family went out. We got some dinner. We came back. All the tubes were gone. Everything was out of him. And that was Chip Miller. He didn't want anybody to have to suffer through what he was going through and the pain that we were all suffering.
He was one of my closest and best friends.
I don't think you could ever find anybody that would find fault with Chip's personality and how he handled them and befriended them. He was just always a nice guy to be around. So it was hard, difficult to lose a person like that. And you could tell how much love he had with the outpouring that we got with his passing. The funeral service and having to manage the amount of people that attended that.
It was crazy, just the amount of people and from all over that came and just supported all of us. It was wonderful.
It was a tough time because, as I know, because his wife Judy, they were in our Corvette club, and like I said, his son Lance, same age as my son, and it was very hard for all of us that knew him.
It left a hole in our hearts. It left a hole in our hearts.
Everybody still thought we were brothers. And to this day, people will still say to me about losing my brother. And of course, we should have been brothers. We spent 30 years together. He was very concerned. We had an agreement that if one or the other of us passed away, that one of the other of us would buy out the other partner. And when he was ill, that was the last thing I wanted to worry about. I didn't want him worrying about it, and I said, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. When he passed away, Judy stepped in, his wife, and I could tell that it was infringing on her health, being under the pressure of what we were doing. It was a big business by then. By 2004, it was a pretty big business, and we had a lot of things going on. There was a lot of decisions to be made, especially with Chip passing, and I could tell it was hard on her.
Immediately, I knew what I had to do. I knew that I needed to help my mom.
Lance had his own business with computers.
And he gave that up to come and take his father's place.
He talked to his mom and said if it was okay with me, he'd step in and help. I said, absolutely. And he's done a great job.
And I talked to my mom, and she said, absolutely, let's do this. So we pounded out an agreement and haven't looked back.
I couldn't be Chip, but Lance stepped in, and he did it for his father.
It's pretty wild to think, again, I always go back to they did something for a hobby. They truly wanted to bring people together, just like-minded, and have fun, throw a party. It's pretty surreal when you walk through, downtown during a show and you see all these places are filled to capacity, and what impact this business has throughout a great community.
I'm just so proud of both of them. Well, actually, the three of them, because it was Bill, Chip, and Lance, because Lance took over.
This was conceived in 1973 at the AACA Hershey swap meet, and we both went home. I don't know whether you were as excited as I was, but I had, 20 business ideas that I never really put into motion, but that particular thought was obviously the best thought that I ever had, that we ever had. And it sure has gone someplace. I went home, I remember telling my parents, I said, I got another idea, but this one, don't need any money to put into motion. I'm going to do it. I just want your blessing.
When I walk out during any event, you always hear different languages, and I love talking to the people that come in here and just learning where they're from and why they came here. And it's pretty wild. They'll set up trips, around the U.S., but they want to come to Carlisle for whatever it may be. Corvettes at Carlisle, fall, spring, whatever it is. But it's so wild to think that they've built something that people are literally traveling the world to come and see.
It's really amazing that Carlisle events over the years, there's been highs and lows as far as the economy is concerned. This is a great place to come for a little bit of money, and you can stay all day for not much money. We keep going and doing what we're doing. Lance and my son Bill are, young enough that they can continue the shows for many, many more years.
And I've certainly had a good time. I'm looking forward to the next 25 years.
I can't believe you did that, because that's the way we end each show, and I wanted to do the same thing. It was great.
Super.
Awesome.
Sure was.